My name is Burville Holloway, and I am 67 years old. At my age, many people imagine quiet evenings in a rocking chair with knitting on my lap and grandchildren playing nearby. Such was my dream, once upon a time. Now I know that the reality is often quite different, especially when you live under the same roof with a daughter-in-law who sees you only as a burden. It all began 3 years ago, when my husband Winthrop died of a heart attack 42 years together. And suddenly I was alone in our spacious house on Cherry Street every corner. Everything reminded me of him. His shabby chair in the living room, his collection of old vinyl records in the study, the tools in the garage hung neatly on the walls. Winthrop had been a railroad dispatcher all his life, a man of order and precision. "Trains don't forgive tardiness, Burvy," he liked to say. In our marriage, he was the one who always had his finger on the pulse, and I was the one who created coziness. After his death, our house, instead of a cozy nest, became a museum of memories where I wandered like a ghost, stumbling upon phantoms of the past. The silence was deafening. I tried to fill the void with TV, radio, even started talking to houseplants. My son Donathan visited me once a week, usually on Sundays, but his visits were short and awkward. He had never been particularly close to his father, and his relationship with me was still somewhere in the teenage years, when every phrase I said was a rebuke or a lecture. That was probably why, when one Sunday lunch, Donathan had suggested that I sell the house and move in with them, I had agreed almost without hesitation. It seemed like the perfect solution at the time. I'd help them with the down payment on a new, bigger house with room for me, and in return, I'd get what I was so afraid of losing: a family. "You don't want to live alone, Mom," Donathan said, covering my hand with his. "Besides, Josine will be happy to see her grandmother every day. Josine is my granddaughter. She's 15 now. When she was 12, she was really excited at the prospect of me moving in. We used to be close. I taught her how to bake cookies, told her stories about how I met her grandfather at an amusement park dance in the summer of 1976. She loved to listen to these stories, sitting on the floor at my feet and braiding colorful bracelets from the thread I bought her. But then, 3 years ago, I didn't know Lucy as well as I do now. Lucy Holloway, my son's wife, was smiling and friendly when we met on holidays and Sundays. "Burville, you look amazing. Burville, this pie is divine. Burville, we are so happy to see you." I realize now that her smile never reached her eyes, and the compliments sounded mechanical, like memorized phrases. We sold the house quickly. Real estate in Pomona was highly valued at the time. I made a decent sum, most of which I paid for their new house on Magnolia Drive. It was a spacious 2-story house with a basement and a backyard where Donathan planned to build a barbecue area. I got a room on the first floor next to the kitchen to make it more comfortable for you, Mom. Things went smoothly for the first few months. I helped with the cooking, sometimes picked Josine up from school when Lucy was late at her nail salon. Yeah, my sister-in-law owns a little salon on the outskirts of Pomona. Not a god-awful business, but Lucy always talks about it like it's a chain of high-end spas all along the coast. Donathan works for a plastic window company and is in charge of inventory control. It's a tedious job, but stable, he says. I noticed a change about 6 months after I moved in. Little things at first. Lucy started forgetting to call me to the table when they had guests, or making remarks about my clothes. "Burville, that sweater makes you look so old," or "Burville, that color doesn't match your skin tone at all." Then came the more obvious signs. My cookbooks suddenly found themselves boxed up and sent to the garage because they take up too much space in the kitchen. My small collection of porcelain figurines moved from the mantelpiece to the top shelf of the closet in my room because they don't fit in with the new living room design. By the end of our first year together, I felt invisible in my own home. Donathan was always at work or sitting on his cell phone. Josine was spending more and more time with friends or locked in her room. And Lucy had turned into an overseer, controlling my every move. "Burville, you left your cup in the sink again." "Burwell, please don't touch the thermostat. The electric bill is huge as it is." "Burwell, we agreed that you would not use the washing machine on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are my days." I tried to talk to my son, but he only waved it off. "Mom, you're exaggerating. Lucy just likes order. You need to get used to the new rules." The new rules multiplied every month. I wasn't allowed to watch TV after 9 p.m. because the sound interferes with Josine's ability to get ready for class. I couldn't invite my few girlfriends over because the house is not a place for retired people to gather. I couldn't cook anything more complicated than a sandwich because the smell of fried food gets into the curtains. Gradually, my life shrank to the size of my room, where I retreated more and more often to avoid Lucy's barbed remarks. I began to feel like a guest, tolerated out of grace, rather than a member of the family whose money had made the purchase of this house possible. The most painful blow was Josine's alienation. Lucy methodically destroyed our bond by exploiting adolescent vulnerability and the desire to conform. Your grandmother is so old-fashioned. Look how weird her habits are. You don't want to be as nerdy as her, do you? I heard these phrases as I passed Josine's room, and I saw how my granddaughter looked me in the eye, less and less, how she avoided being alone with me. I turned 67 this year. I didn't expect much, maybe a modest family dinner, maybe a card drawn by Josine, like in years past. But on the morning of my birthday, no one even remembered the date. Jonathan left for work, muttering the standard bye toward the kitchen where I was drinking my morning tea. Josine ran off to school without even eating breakfast. Lucy was in front of the mirror in the hallway, applying another coat of lipstick. "Burville," she said without turning around, "we're having guests tonight. Nothing fancy, just a little dinner with friends." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "It would be nice if you made your apple pie. Everyone always praises it." It sounded almost like a compliment, and I felt a slight warmth in my chest. Maybe they remembered after all? Maybe this was their way of surprising me. "Of course, Lucy," I said. "I'll bake a pie." I spent the whole day in the kitchen preparing not only the pie but also other dishes that I knew Donatan and Josine loved. By 5 o'clock, the house was filled with the aromas of vanilla, cinnamon, and stew. I even dressed up a little, wearing a blue dress that Winthrop had always found particularly elegant. For once, I felt needed and important. Lucy returned around 6, laden with bags from the supermarket. "Oh, you've already done all the cooking," she said, glancing around the table. "But I bought ready meals from the delicatessen section. Everyone loves their canapés and salads." My heart sank, but I tried not to show it. "That's okay," I said. "More food isn't a problem." Lucy pressed her lips together, eyeing my outfit. "Are you going to sit at the table like that?" "What's wrong with it?" I asked, looking at my dress. It's very formal for a home-cooked dinner, don't you think?" She shook her head. "Anyway, before the guests arrive, could you go down to the basement and see if the heater's working? Mabel's always freezing, and we want to show them the wine cellar that Jonathan had set up." The wine cellar was my son's pride, a small room in the basement where he kept a dozen bottles of cheap wine bought on promotion at the supermarket. But he liked to show it off to guests, talking about bouquets and tannins with the air of a connoisseur. "Okay," I agreed, heading for the door to the basement. The stairs were steep and poorly lit. I descended carefully, holding onto the railing. It was cool and damp downstairs, despite Jonathan's best efforts to make the place presentable. I found a space heater in the corner and turned it on, checking to see how quickly the coil heated up. Suddenly, I heard the door creak open and Lucy's footsteps. "Burville," she called. "Did you find the heater?" "Yes, it's working," I said, climbing a few steps. But before I could get any higher, the door slammed shut with a loud bang, and I heard the click of the lock. "Lucy?" I called out, coming to the door. "Lucy, the door has slammed!" "I know, Burville," came a voice from the other side. There wasn't a trace of worry in it. "It's just the way it was meant to be." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Open the door, please." "I'm afraid not," Lucy said in the tone of voice used to explain obvious things to small children. "We have important guests coming tonight, and frankly, you'd spoil everything with your presence. Always interrupting, telling your endless stories of the good old days. It's tiresome, Burville." I stood there numb with shock and humiliation. "But it's my birthday," I said quietly. There was silence at the door for a moment. "Oh, so that's why you're dressed up," Lucy said with a slight chuckle. "The party isn't for you, Burville. We just wanted to get some friends together, and your birthday is, well, let's just say it's not a very important occasion." I felt tears coming to my throat, but I held them back. I didn't want to cry in front of that woman, even if she couldn't see me now. "When are you going to let me out?" I asked, trying to keep my voice firm. "When the guests had left," Lucy answered. "Don't worry, you won't starve to death in one night. There's a heater, so you won't get cold. Just sit quietly, and don't even try to knock or yell. The music will be loud enough to drown out any noise. By the way, I told everyone that you've gone to a friend's house for the weekend, so don't even think anyone will be looking for you." Her footsteps drifted away, and I was alone in the semi-dark basement lit only by a dim bulb and the orange glow of the heater. Rage, resentment, and helplessness came over me in a wave. How could she? How could my own son allow me to be treated like this? Was I really that insignificant to them? I slowly sank down into an old chair that stood next to the wine cabinet. My hands were shaking, whether from anger or fear. At that moment, I felt a vibration in my dress pocket. My cell phone. I had completely forgotten about it. The small, old smartphone Donathan had given me when he'd bought himself a newer model. "You don't need more than that, Mom. Just for emergency calls." It wasn't just a phone. It was a connection to the outside world, and a way to find out what was going on upstairs in my own home while I was locked up here like an unwanted item hidden out of sight. Holding the phone in my hands, I felt a strange calmness, as if gaining that small piece of control allowed me to gather my thoughts. A little over a month ago, I'd installed security cameras in the house, small, almost invisible devices that could easily be hidden on a bookshelf or behind a picture frame. And I didn't do it out of paranoia, as many might think, but because of a series of strange disappearances. First, my pearl earrings, Winthrop's 30th wedding anniversary gift, disappeared. I remembered exactly that I'd left them in the jewelry box on my dressing table. When I asked about them, Lucy rounded her eyes and said, "Burville, you probably just forgot where you put them. That's normal at your age." Then the brooch my mother had given me before she died went missing. Then a bottle of expensive perfume I'd saved for special occasions. The little porcelain statue of a ballerina on my bedside table. Every time Lucy and Donathan offered the same explanation, "I forgot. I moved it. It was my own fault." But the last straw was the disappearance of my diary. I had kept it since I was 17, a thick leather-bound notebook where I wrote down my thoughts, my fears, my joys, where I pasted dried flowers and tickets from memorable events. This diary was a part of me, my story. Then one morning I discovered it wasn't in its usual place in my dresser drawer. I turned the whole room over, then the whole house as far as I was allowed. The diary was nowhere to be found. When I turned to Donathan in desperation, he shrugged. "Mom, it's just an old notebook. Maybe you accidentally threw it away while cleaning?" But I would never throw away my journal. Never. That's when I decided to take action. My old friend Elspeth, whom we met back in the gardening club, helped me buy miniature security cameras. Her son owns an electronics store, and it was no problem for her. "Do you have a smartphone, Burvey?" she asked. "Then you can look at the footage anytime you want." Elspeth, on the other hand, helped me install an app and set up the cameras so they would activate when I moved and send notifications to my phone. We installed 3 cameras, one in my room, aimed at my closet and dresser, one in the living room with a view of the mantelpiece where my remaining figurines stood, and one in the kitchen, just in case. I hadn't told my family about the cameras. Something told me that if they found out, the cameras would accidentally break or disappear, just like my stuff. And now, sitting in the locked basement, I thanked fate for my foresight. I opened the app and the screen split into 3 parts, showing broadcasts from all the cameras. The living room was already filled with people. I counted about 15 guests, mostly Lucy's friends from her salon and a few of Donathan's coworkers. My pie stood untouched in the corner of the table, and next to it were the exquisite canapes Lucy had bought. I turned up the sound on the camera in the living room. The music did play loudly, but I could still make out the occasional conversation when someone was close to the camera. "Where's your mother-in-law?" asked a woman with bright red hair I hadn't seen before. Lucy rolled her eyes theatrically. "She's at a friend's house, thank God. Honestly, it's a real treat to have an evening without her endless stories about my dear Winthrop." The redhead laughed and they walked away. but I could already feel my cheeks burning with humiliation. I shifted my gaze to the kitchen, where Donathan was opening a bottle of wine. Mabel, the neighbor to his right, a woman about my age with whom we sometimes exchanged pleasantries over the fence, approached him. "Donathan, where's Burville?" I brought her a small gift. My son froze for a moment, then turned with a strained smile. "She's visiting a friend in Riverside. You know, Mom's been so outgoing lately." He grinned as if it were an amusing joke. "Oh," Mabel looked disappointed. "It's strange that she left on her birthday. I thought—" "Birthday?" Donathan interrupted her, and I saw his face go a little pale. "Oh, right. Yes, we'd celebrated in advance last weekend. A small family dinner, just the way she likes it. Lies. Pure lies." Donathan and Lucy had gone to the coast last weekend, leaving me alone with Josine, who spent most of the time at her friend's house anyway. Mabel nodded, but I could see in her eyes that she didn't quite believe it. "Give her this when she gets back," she said, holding out a small package. "It's just lavender tea. Burville had mentioned once that she loved it." My eyes filled with tears. A stranger remembered my preferences and my birthday better than my own family. I swiped my finger across the screen, switching between cameras. Josine sat in the corner, tucked away on her phone, a look of obvious boredom on her face. She'd never liked Lucy's parties. Too many adults, too many fake smiles and strained conversations. Suddenly, my attention was caught by a new guest who had just walked through the door. A tall, lean man with dark hair slicked back and sharp facial features. He was wearing an expensive suit that nevertheless looked slightly out of place in the casual atmosphere of the house party. I recognized him immediately. Drake Cambleworth, my financial advisor. The man who, on Donathan's recommendation, had helped me manage the money from the sale of my house. After Winthrop's death, I was so distraught that I gratefully accepted my son's offer to find a trusted professional. Drake came to me once a quarter with reports full of numbers and graphs that told me little, but he always assured me that my investments were in good shape, and that was good enough for me. Now, seeing him at this party, I felt a little uneasy. What was he doing here? As far as I knew, Donathan wasn't particularly friendly with him. Lucy greeted Drake with an enthusiasm that seemed excessive to me. She pecked him on the cheek and took him under her arm to introduce him to the other guests. But what really caught my attention was the way they looked at each other when they thought no one could see. Gazes too intimate for mere acquaintances. I switched the camera to the kitchen, where they found themselves a few minutes later, standing too close together at the refrigerator. "You're late," Lucy said. But there was no reproach in her voice, more playfulness. "The meeting ran late," Drake replied, looking over his shoulder. "Where is she?" "Don't worry, the old woman's locked in the basement. Thinks it's because of the party," Lucy grinned. "She has no idea that her precious son has agreed to send her to Pine Hills as early as next month." Pine Hills? The name sounded vaguely familiar. It took me a few seconds to remember. It's a nursing home on the outskirts of Pomona. Not a bad place, but not an elite facility. I was going to be sent there, without my knowledge or consent? "Is everything ready?" Drake asked. "Paperwork, power of attorney?" "Donathan will take care of it next week," Lucy said. "The lawyer's already done the paperwork. The old woman won't even know what she's signing. Let's say it's a renewal of insurance or something like that." "And if she says no?" Lucy shrugged. "Then plan B. You've seen how absent-minded she is. Sometimes forgets to turn off the stove or locks herself in the bathroom." She winked. "A couple more of those occasions and even the most picky judge would find her incompetent." A chill ran down my spine. I never forgot to turn off the stove, and I never locked myself in the bathroom. Were these incidents faked? Had they really gone that far in their desire to get rid of me? "Are you sure Donathan is fully on board?" Drake asked, lowering his voice. "He's a weakling," Lucy said dismissively. "Of course he has his doubts. She is his mother, after all. But he wants the whole house, unencumbered by an old woman. And most of all, he wants the money. Didn't you say there's still money left in the accounts? What she didn't put into the house?" Drake nodded. "About $150,000, plus Winthrop's monthly pension and insurance. Not a fortune, but enough to pay for Pine Hills for several years to come and still have enough left over for home improvements and maybe a new car." "A new car?" My money that I've been saving all my life, the money Winthrop earned, will go toward a new car for Lucy? While I was rotting away in Pine Hills, I felt anger boiling up inside me, not just resentment or disappointment, pure, undiluted rage. How dare they? How dare my own son participate in this? Their conversation was interrupted when Josine entered the kitchen, clearly looking for something in the refrigerator. Lucy and Drake instantly pulled away from each other, adopting casual poses. "Josine, darling, what are you doing?" Lucy asked with a strained smile. "Looking for a soda," the girl mumbled, not looking at them. "There are drinks in the living room," Lucy said in a tone that brooked no objection. "There's only wine and that nasty mineral water," Josine said. "I want a Coke." "Josine, we don't—" "Let her have it," Drake interrupted with sudden gentleness. "Isn't that what parties are for? For everyone to get what they want?" He winked at the girl, and I noticed Josine flinch slightly before grabbing the can of Coke and hurrying out of the kitchen. That brief interaction gave me a new wave of unease. There was something unpleasant about the way Drake was looking at my granddaughter. Something predatory. I switched back to the living room, where Donathan was now talking to a coworker, a full-figured man in a plaid shirt whose name I couldn't remember. "And what about your mother?" the coworker asked. "Does she still live with you?" Donathan sighed, sipping from his glass. "For now, yes. But we're thinking about a nursing home. She'd be better off there. Professional care. Socialization with her peers." "Is she okay with that?" "Not really," Donathan grimaced. "But frankly, she doesn't have much choice. Her money is mostly invested in this house, and it's not in her name. Legally, it's our property. Lucy's already found a nice place with a garden and everything." "It doesn't sound cheap," said a colleague. "Yes, but Mom has a pension and some savings. And as Lucy said, she's done enough for us. It's our turn to decide what's best for her." I couldn't believe my ears. My turn? After everything I'd given away? After selling the house where I'd lived most of my life? Where every corner reminded me of Winthrop? After giving them almost all the money from the sale, leaving myself only a small amount for a rainy day? Outrage overwhelmed me, but I felt fear at the same time. If they did decide to declare me incompetent, as Lucy had implied, I would have no legal rights. They would be able to manage my money, decide where I lived, what I ate, when I slept. I switched the camera back to the kitchen, where Lucy was now talking to a friend from the salon, a tall blonde with an excessive amount of jewelry. "So, if everything goes according to plan, we'll have the house all to ourselves by the end of the summer," Lucy said. "We can finally turn that awful room next to the kitchen into the spa area I've always wanted." "Would Burville really be okay with a nursing home?" the blonde asked, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "Who cares?" Lucy snorted. "At her age, she should be used to the idea of the young making decisions. Do you know what she did last week? Washed Josine's silk blouse in the washing machine. $600 down the drain." The blonde gasped like it was the worst crime of all. "I told you she wasn't herself," Lucy continued. "Last week, Donathan found her in the kitchen at 3 o'clock in the morning. She was supposedly looking for water. But I'm pretty sure she was trying to set the house on fire. That was an outright lie. I did go down to the kitchen in the night because I woke up thirsty. But Donathan hadn't even left his room. I would have heard his footsteps on the stairs." "That sounds dangerous," the blonde said. "What if—" Their conversation was interrupted when Drake walked into the kitchen. The blonde immediately found an excuse to leave, leaving them alone. "Your husband is becoming a problem," Drake said without preamble. "I just talked to him about Pine Hills, and he's starting to have doubts. Something about his mother deserving a better place." Lucy rolled her eyes. "He's always like that. First he agrees, then he hesitates. Don't worry, I'll get him out of here." "There's not much time," Drake reminded her. "The longer she's here, the greater the risk of her getting suspicious. Especially with the translations." "What translations?" I was wary, though of course they couldn't hear me. "She won't suspect anything," Lucy said. "The old woman barely knows how to use a telephone. She doesn't even know how to check her balance online." That wasn't entirely true. I knew how to use online banking, but I preferred the traditional methods of calling the bank or visiting a branch. But now, locked in the basement, I was grateful that Lucy underestimated my technical skills. "What about the power of attorney?" Drake asked. Had she signed it? Not yet, Lucy answered. But Donathan promised to get it done next week. He said he'd ask her to update her medical power of attorney because of the recent changes in her insurance. She always signs anything he slips her. I clenched my teeth. Yes, I trusted my son. Trusted him to handle my finances, signed the documents he brought me, rarely reading the fine print. But now I knew I couldn't trust him or anyone else in this house. What if she refuses? Drake asked again. Then it's back to the plan with her absent-mindedness and dangerous behavior. Lucy lowered her voice. No one's going to believe an old woman who regularly forgets to turn off the gas or tries to leave the house in her nightgown. It could take time. We have time. The money isn't going anywhere just yet. Lucy smiled and put her hand on Drake's shoulder. You've taken care of it, haven't you? Still under your control? Drake nodded, but something like worry flashed in his eyes. Of course I am. I just don't like waiting around when everything could have been ours by now. Ours? Not your, but our? What does that mean? Does Drake have a claim on my money too? And what do you mean under his control? Shouldn't my savings be in my personal accounts? I switched to the camera in the living room where Donathan was now talking to Drake. My son looked slightly inebriated, his usually neatly coiffed hair disheveled. Look, Drake, I think we should find a better place than Pine Hills, he said, waving his glass around. My mom deserves better. She always took care of me, gave us almost all the money from the sale of the house. Drake put his hand on Donathan's shoulder in a soothing gesture. Of course, my friend, of course. But you realize that the best places cost more, a lot more. And your mother's financial situation, as we discussed, does not allow for such expenses. But the $150,000 that's left, it'll run out quickly, Drake interrupted. Especially if you choose a place with a higher level of service. 2 or 3 years, and then what? You'd have to pay extra out of your own pocket, and you've got a family, a daughter who's about to go to college. Donathan frowned, obviously struggling with conflicting feelings. I just want her to be happy. She'll be happy, Drake assured him. Pine Hills is a great place. There's a garden, weekly activities, nurses around the clock. It's the best thing you can do for her under the circumstances. My son nodded, his resistance clearly melting away. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see that he was being used. That this smooth financial advisor and his own wife were manipulating him to get to my money. But all I could do was watch helplessly through my phone screen, trapped in the basement of my own house. I switched back to the kitchen where Lucy and Drake were alone again. He's hesitant, Drake said. But I think I've convinced him, reminded him about the college money for Josine. Good for you, Lucy smiled, moving closer. I always knew I could count on you. What else can you count on? Drake asked with a meaningful smile, and I turned away from the screen, not wanting to see what was coming next. My heart was pounding with fear and rage. They planned to take everything from me, my money, my freedom, my family, and to use my own son to do it, manipulating his guilt and financial ambition. But now I knew. And knowledge is power, as Winthrop liked to say. I wasn't going to give up without a fight. I wasn't going to let them send me to Pine Hills and forget about me while they enjoyed my money. I resolutely opened the bank app on my phone. Time to find out exactly what Drake meant by transfers and my money being under his control. Opening the bank app, I stared at the screen, trying to remember the password. For the past few months, Donathan had insisted that he handle all financial matters. You don't have to worry about that, Mom. I'm in control. And like a dutiful mother, I trusted him, a silly, naive old woman. I tried several combinations before I remembered the correct password, Winthrop's birthday, and the first 3 digits of our old home phone. When the app finally opened, I gasped in surprise. The balance in my main account was only $2,384. What had happened to the $150,000 Drake and Lucy were talking about? I scrolled through the transaction history for the last 6 months. Regular receipts of Winthrop's pension and my own small elementary school teacher's pension. Regular deductions for utilities, insurance, medications. But I also found a series of transfers to an account labeled Campbellworth Investment Fund. Each transfer was between $3,000 and $5,000, and they occurred about once a month. I never authorized these transfers. I never signed the paperwork to create some kind of Campbellworth investment fund. This must be what Drake was talking about when he mentioned the money being under his control. With trembling fingers, I opened my email. It too was a mess. Dozens of unread emails, most of which were advertisements or spam. But among them, I found monthly reports from the Campbellworth Investment Fund. I opened the latest one, dated last month. The report was peppered with financial terms and charts that told me little. But there was something at the end that caught my eye, a copy of my signed authorization to transfer funds. Only it wasn't my signature. Someone had forged it, and they had done it rather ineptly. The letters were angular and stiff, whereas my signature had always been rounded and smooth, a legacy of years of teaching calligraphy to third graders. Furiously scouring my email further, I found several more such reports, each with a forged signature. Then I came across correspondence between Drake and my son. The emails were labeled forwarded. Apparently, Donathan had used my address to communicate with Drake about my finances. In one of the letters, Drake wrote, "Donathan, per our conversation, I have transferred another $4,000 from your mother's retirement fund to the investment fund. As usual, 10% will remain in your personal account as a management fee. The rest will be invested in our regular assets. The attached form will need to be signed and returned to me for documentation." $400. My son was getting $400 every month for letting Drake plunder my savings. I felt nauseous. I put the phone away and inhaled deeply, trying to deal with the wave of nausea and dizziness. When I calmed down a bit, I went back to the emails and discovered that the financial shenanigans were just the tip of the iceberg of betrayal. In my junk mail folder, I found a series of emails labeled as spam, but sent from an address that made my heart clench. Tal akelawait@westcoast.com. The email address of my daughter, Talitha. I hadn't seen or spoken to Talitha in almost 7 years. Our last meeting ended in a terrible fight, after which she left, slamming the door and vowing never to cross my threshold again. The reason was her marriage to Rufus, a man I considered completely unsuitable for my educated, driven daughter. He was a musician, perpetually broke, with questionable connections and an even more questionable past. At least that's how Donathan, who had met him several times, had described him to me. "He's using her, Mom," my son told me. "Talitha pays all the bills while he finds himself and tours with his third-rate band. She deserves better." And I believed it. During our last meeting, I told Talitha everything I thought about her choices. I told her she was repeating the mistakes of her Aunt Mary Ann, who'd gotten involved with the same slacker and ended up raising 3 children alone, barely making ends meet. Talitha responded by accusing me of never letting her make her own decisions, always controlling her life, and never taking a real interest in what was important to her. "You don't even bother to get to know Rufus!" she yelled. "You judge him on the words of Donathan, who was always jealous of me and did everything he could to turn you against me." I dismissed her words as mere dramatization. Donathan had always been the more judicious of my children, the more practical. If he said Rufus was a problem, then he was. After Talitha left, I tried to contact her several times, but she wouldn't answer her phone. After a couple of months, I sent her an email apologizing, but got no response. Gradually, I came to terms with the idea that I had lost my daughter forever. But now, looking at the long list of emails in my spam folder, I realized that Talitha had been trying to contact me all this time. I opened the earliest letter, dated almost 6.5 years ago, just a few months after our fight. "Dear Mother, I thought for a long time before writing to you. Pride told me to keep quiet, but my heart won't let me. I miss you. Despite all our differences, you are my mother, and I love you. I know you're worried about my future with Rufus. I know that Donathan has told you some not so flattering things about him. But Mother, you should know that your son has never taken the trouble to really get to know my husband. Rufus is not the man Donathan describes him as. He's a musician, yes, but he's not some penniless drifter. He teaches music at the Riverside School of the Arts, has a permanent contract and health insurance, and his third-rate band is actually quite successful in its genre. They play festivals regularly and have released 2 albums. I'm not asking you to love him right away. Just give it a chance. Come over for dinner, get to know him yourself, without the preconceptions that Donathan has put in your head. As for money, I'm not supporting Rufus as my brother claimed. We both work and contribute equally to the family budget. In fact, Rufus earned more than me last year thanks to royalties from his music used in a commercial. Please, Mom, let's try to make this right. Life is too short for such long grudges. Love, Talitha. Tears flowed down my cheeks as I finished the letter. All this time I had believed my daughter had cut all ties with me, while she was holding out an olive branch to me that I just couldn't see. I opened the next letter, dated a month later. Mom, I don't know if you received my previous letter. I've called several times, but Lucy always says you're busy or on vacation. Maybe you're still mad at me and that's your right. But I want you to know that when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. Rufus says hi. He never held it against you for what happened, says he understands your concern. Love, Talitha. Lucy, of course. She was intercepting Talitha's calls, saying I was busy or resting. She must have been setting up filters in my email so that emails from my daughter would automatically go to spam, and was doing all this while I was grieving the loss of contact with my own child. I continued to read the emails, each one a stab to the heart. Talitha wrote about her life, about her work, about Rufus. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she wanted me to be a part of her life. In one of her letters, dated about 4 years ago, she mentioned that she and Rufus were expecting a baby, my grandson or granddaughter, that I didn't even know existed. The ultrasound showed it was going to be a boy. We decided to name him Winthrop after Daddy. I so wish you were here for me at this moment, Mom. Rufus says it's not too late to make things right. Please call me. Boy. I have a grandson named Winthrop that I've never met. A child named after my late husband, growing up without knowing his grandmother. The thought took my breath away. The last letter was dated just 3 months earlier. Dear Mom, today little Winthrop turned 3 years old. He is growing up to be such a smart and inquisitive boy. He has your eyes, Mama, just as blue and piercing, and your smile. I show him pictures and tell him about you. He knows he has a Grandma Burville who lives in Pomona. Sometimes he asks when we are going to go visit you. I don't know what to say. I realize you probably don't read these letters. Maybe you changed your email address a long time ago, or you just delete them without opening them, but I keep writing because I can't bear the thought that it's over between us. Ever since my dad died, I often think about how quickly time passes. We can't get back the lost years, Mom, but we can decide not to lose any more. I work as an inspector for county social services, specializing in elderly cases. Every day I see how important family ties are, especially in older adults. And every day I think about you, how you're doing, whether you're healthy, whether you're happy. Jonathan rarely answers my questions about you. He says you're fine, but you don't want to talk to me. Maybe that's true. Maybe the resentment is too deep. But if you ever change your mind, know this. My door is always open to you. Love. Talitha P.S. I am enclosing our new home address and phone number. We moved to a bigger house last year. I wrote down the phone number with a trembling hand. My daughter, my Talitha, had been trying to reach me all these years. And I thought she didn't want to see me. We lost so much time because of lies, because of Lucy and Jonathan's manipulations. And Talitha works for social services, specializing in elderly cases. The bitter irony is my own daughter protects the elderly every day from the likes of Lucy and Drake, while her own mother has fallen victim to the exact same scheme. I went back to the banking app to understand the full extent of the financial shenanigans. In addition to regular transfers to the Campbellworth Investment Fund, I found other suspicious transactions. For example, monthly payments of $800 to a certain company, LDC Consulting. The acronym probably stood for Lucy Drake Consulting, a shell company set up to withdraw money from my accounts. Looking further, I found checks written for various amounts and cashed by Jonathan. According to the transaction comments, the money was for medication, special food, and medical care for me. Medication I never took, meals I've never seen, care I never received. The more I examined my financial records, the clearer the picture became. In the last 3 years, since Winthrop's death, over $120,000 had been drained from my accounts. The money was flowing out slowly but steadily, like water through small cracks in a dam. And if it hadn't been for a fluke, The fact that Lucy had locked me in the basement with the phone the day I was born, I might never have learned the truth. Suddenly, the whole puzzle came together. The disappearing things, the intercepted emails, the financial shenanigans, the plans to send me to a nursing home. It was all part of one big plan to get rid of me and embezzle my money. But there was one aspect that still puzzled me. Why would Donathan be involved in this? Yes, he was getting his share of the transfers, but the amounts were relatively small. Would my son really betray me for a few $100s a month? The answer came when I opened one of the letters from Drake to Donathan tucked away in my drafts folder. Donathan wanted to clarify the details of our plan after your mother's transfer to Pine Hills. As we discussed, once her guardianship is finalized, we will be able to sell the house. I estimate that with the current real estate market in Pomona, you can get about $800,000. After paying off the remainder of the mortgage, approximately $250,000, and setting aside funds for your mother's stay in a nursing home for the next 5 years, approximately $150,000, you will be left with about $400,000 net profit. According to our agreement, 20% of that amount, $80,000, will go to me as a commission for organizing the entire process and managing the investment. The remaining $320,000 will be at your complete disposal. Of course, all of this must appear as a concern for your mother's welfare. We'll draw up the paperwork to make it look perfectly legal. Awaiting your confirmation, Drake. That's it. It wasn't the petty thefts from the accounts that were the main goal. They were only a prelude. The real target was the house. My house, bought with the money from the sale of the house where Winthrop and I had lived most of our lives. A house that was now worth almost double what it had been 3 years ago thanks to the rising real estate market in Pomona. $320,000. That's the price my son sold his mother for. That's what my freedom, my dignity, the rest of my life was worth. I put the phone away and closed my eyes, feeling the waves of anger, pain, and betrayal roll in one after another. How could he? How could my own son, the child I carried under my heart, the one I read bedtime stories to, the one whose broken knees I kissed, do this to me? But anger was quickly replaced by determination. I won't let them win. I won't let them turn me into a helpless victim. I have proof of their machinations. I have the phone. And I have a daughter who works for Social Security, specializing in cases just like mine. I picked up the phone again and found Talitha's number, the one she'd left in her last letter. My fingers trembled as I dialed the numbers. What would I tell her after so many years of silence? Would she believe me? Wouldn't she think I was just a senile old woman making up conspiracies? But I had no choice. I had to take the risk. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the call button and put the phone to my ear. 1 beep, 2, 3. Maybe she'd changed her number? Maybe she was at work or with her family. On the 5th beep, just as I was ready to hear voicemail, there was a click, and then a voice I hadn't heard in 7 long years. Hello? Talitha said warily, not recognizing the number. Talitha? My voice trembled. It's Mom. There was a silence on the other end of the line, so deep that for a moment I thought the connection had been cut. Then I heard a ragged sigh. Mom? Her voice was a mixture of disbelief, hope, and fear. Is it really you? Yes, dear, I said, unable to hold back my tears. It's me, and I need your help. Mom? Talitha's voice shook with disbelief. Is it really you? Yes, sweetheart, I said, struggling to hold back my tears. It's me. There was a short pause, and then Talitha spoke quickly, as if she was afraid the connection would break. Mom, I've been writing to you for years. I called you. I thought you didn't want to talk to me. I know, darling, I interrupted her. I just found your letters, all your letters. They were forwarded to the spam folder. I never saw them until today. What? But how? She was silent for a moment. Lucy. That's her, right? A bitter laugh escaped my chest. Yes, Lucy, and not just the letters. It's much worse than you can imagine. And I told her everything, about how I was slowly becoming a prisoner in my own house, about the missing things, about the cameras I'd installed, about being locked in the basement on my own birthday, about the overheard conversations between Lucy and Drake, about the financial fraud, about the plans to send me to a nursing home and sell the house. Talitha listened in silence, only occasionally exhaling in indignation or asking short questions. When I finished, there was a pause. Mom, she finally said, her voice firm and professional. What you are describing is a classic case of financial abuse of an elderly person. And then there's the psychological abuse and the restraint. It's a crime, and we can hold them accountable. Do you believe me? I asked, still afraid she'd think I was paranoid. Of course I believe you, Talitha answered without hesitation. In my job, I see cases like this almost every week. Unfortunately, it's often the close relatives who become abusers. And what you're describing is too detailed and consistent for fiction. Besides, her voice softened, I always knew you wouldn't have stopped communicating with me of your own free will. Deep inside, I felt something was wrong. Tears came to my eyes again, but now they were tears of relief. My daughter believed me. My daughter was on my side. What are we going to do? I asked, wiping my tears with my sleeve. First of all, we have to document everything, Talitha said firmly. You said you have access to the cameras. Keep recording everything that happens, especially if Lucy and Drake discuss their plans again. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Okay. What else? Can you forward me those letters from Drake and the bank statements? I want to have copies of all the evidence in case they find out you know something and try to delete the information from your phone. I'm not sure I know how to do that, I admitted. That's okay, Talitha said. I'll explain step by step. For the next 10 minutes, she patiently guided me through the process of forwarding emails and screenshots of bank statements to her address. When we were done, she continued, Now I need to call the police. What they've done is unlawful imprisonment, and it's a serious offense. But before I do that, tell me, are you safe now? They can't come into the basement suddenly? I looked back at the heavy wooden door. The door was locked from the outside. Lucy said she'd let me out when the guests dispersed. But the party's in full swing now, so it's unlikely anyone will be coming down here anytime soon. All right. Sighs. Listen carefully, Mom. I'm going to call the Pomona police right now. I'm going to explain the situation and have them come to your house. Then I'm going to contact a lawyer who specializes in elder protection cases. We work with him at Social Security, and he'll be able to quickly file a temporary restraining order prohibiting Donathan, Lucy, and Drake from handling your finances. But the police, I began, suddenly afraid. What if Donathan and Lucy convinced them that I'm just a senile old woman out of my mind, that it was all a figment of my imagination? You have proof, Mom, Talitha reminded me. Cameras, tapes of conversations, forged signatures, illegal transfers. Besides, her voice hardened, I'm a social services inspector. They'll listen to me. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. And then what? After the police arrive? You'll come with me, Talitha said without hesitation. We have a guest room ready for you. In fact, it's always been ready, just in case you decided to visit us. Her voice softened, and I felt a pang of guilt for all the years we'd lost to lies and manipulation. Talitha, I started, but she interrupted me. Not now, Mom. We'll have plenty of time to talk later. Right now, the important thing is to get you out of there and keep you safe. She paused. One more thing. There's a man who really wants to meet you. Winthrop, I whispered. My grandson. Yes. A smile appeared in Talitha's voice. Little Winnie. He knows all about you. I've shown him pictures, told him stories. He asks about you almost every day. New tears came to my eyes. A grandson I've never seen. A grandson named after my late husband. A grandson who knows about me thanks to a daughter who has not given up hope of reconnecting us despite years of silence. I can't wait to meet him, I said, barely coping with my emotions. And neither can he, Talitha replied. Now let's get back to the plan. I call the police, then the lawyer. Then I drive to your place. It's about an hour from Riverside to Pomona. While I'm on my way, keep collecting evidence through the cameras. And if anything changes, if Lucy or anyone else comes down to the basement, call me immediately. Okay, I agreed. But Talitha, be careful. I don't know how they'll react when the police show up at the door. Don't worry about us, Mom. Worry about yourself. Keep holding the phone and collecting evidence. I'll call you as soon as I'm done with the police and the lawyer. We said goodbye, and I felt strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. I had a daughter who believed me and was willing to fight for me. I had a plan. I went back to the camera app to continue monitoring what was going on in the house. The party was in full swing. The music was blaring. The guests were laughing and talking. Lucy walked between them with a glass of wine, glowing in her red dress as if she were the star of the evening. Jonathan stood in the corner talking to Drake, his face looking tense. I turned up the sound on the camera in the living room, trying to make out their conversation through the music and the hum of voices. I'm not sure Pine Hills is the best option, Jonathan said. I checked the reviews online, and there are a lot of complaints about the staff and conditions. Drake put his hand on my son's shoulder. Jonathan, my friend, you're overthinking this. Pine Hills is the perfect balance of price and quality. Yes, there are better places, but they cost twice or three times as much. And considering how much we've already invested of your mother's money, we have to be practical. Jonathan frowned. I know, but still, it's my mother. She deserves better. Of course she does, Drake agreed with false sincerity in his voice. And she'll get the best on a budget. Besides, once the house is sold, you can move her to a more expensive facility if you want. What about that paper she has to sign? Jonathan asked, lowering his voice. Are you sure it's legal? Drake grinned. Technically, yes. It's a standard form of power of attorney, just with expanded powers. It gives you the authority to make all financial and medical decisions on your mother's behalf. Completely legal, provided she signs it voluntarily and in her right mind. And if she refuses, then we'll have to go the longer route, through the courts, with medical reports that she's incapacitated. But that could take months. It's much easier if she just signs. They stepped back, their voices drowned out in the noise. I switched to the camera in the kitchen, where Lucy was talking to the blonde woman I'd seen earlier. So if everything goes according to plan, we'll have the house all to ourselves by the end of the summer, Lucy said, filling glasses with wine. I've already picked a designer for the renovation. I want to completely remodel the first floor, tear down the wall between the kitchen and dining room, make an open space. What about the mother-in-law's room? The blonde asked. Oh, it will be my personal spa area, Lucy grinned. Jacuzzi, sauna, massage table. I've always dreamed of such a thing. Is Jonathan sure he's okay with putting his mother in a nursing home? The blonde looked a little worried. He always seemed like such a caring son. Lucy snorted. Jonathan's a wimp. Sure, he has his bouts of filial love, but in the end, he always does what I say. Especially when it comes to money. She lowered her voice. Plus, I reminded him that if we sell the house, we can finally buy that boat he's been dreaming about for the last 5 years. Men are so predictable. The blonde laughed, but there was awkwardness in her laughter. Still, locking your mother-in-law in the basement? Wasn't that a bit much? Lucy shrugged. Oh, come on. She was perfectly safe there. Besides, it was the only way to have a proper party without her endless stories and wailing. You remember the last time she spent 2 hours telling everyone how she met her dead husband? I almost died of boredom. They left and I stayed, seething with anger. My story of meeting Winthrop was one of my dearest memories. The way we met at an amusement park dance in 1976, the way he'd invited me on the carousel, the way we talked until dawn, sitting on a bench by the lake. To Lucy, it was just a boring old woman story. To me, it was a treasure I kept in my heart. My phone vibrated. Talitha. Mom, I've contacted the police, she said without preamble. They are sending a patrol to your house. Should be there in about 20 minutes. I also talked to the lawyer, Adam Lawrence. He's filing an emergency restraining order prohibiting anyone but you from accessing your finances. It's a temporary measure, but it'll give us time to sort everything else out. Thank you, darling, I said, feeling a rush of gratitude. You organized everything so quickly. It's my job, Mom. I could hear the slight smile in her voice. I'm already in the car. I'm on my way to you. Stay in touch and keep recording everything that happens. When the police arrive, they'll call me, and I'll explain the situation to them in more detail. We said goodbye again, and I went back to watching the cameras. Some of the guests had already started to leave. The party was coming to a close. I saw Drake walk up to Lucy and whisper something in her ear. She frowned, then nodded, and together they headed toward the stairs to the second floor. I didn't have cameras on the second floor, and I could only guess what they were talking about in private. Probably discussing the details of their plan or something more personal. The thought that Lucy might have been cheating on my son with his friend made my disgust for her even worse. Jonathan remained in the living room, seeing off the last of the guests. His movements were a little clumsy, a clear sign that he'd drunk more than usual. Mabel, our neighbor, lingered at the door. "It's a lovely party, Jonathan," she said. "But I'm still upset that I didn't get to wish your mother a happy birthday in person." My son looked embarrassed. "Yes, I'm sorry about that. I'll give her your present when she gets back." "Please," Mabel nodded. "And tell her I'm always glad when she stops by for a cup of tea. She seems so withdrawn. I'm worried about her." "There's nothing wrong with her," Jonathan answered too quickly. "It's just age, you know. Getting more withdrawn, less social." Mabel looked at him questioningly, but didn't insist. After she left, Jonathan sighed heavily and fell back on the sofa, his head thrown back. He looked tired and guilty. Maybe somewhere deep inside, my son still remembered what it meant to love his mother. Maybe not all was lost. That hope quickly faded when I saw him pull out his phone and start browsing something with a smile. Yacht club websites, probably. Or the boat catalogs Lucy had mentioned. I switched to the camera in the hallway and saw Josine coming down the stairs. She was in her pajamas, her long brown hair gathered into a careless bun. She walked cautiously past the living room where her father sat and headed for the kitchen. I followed her through the kitchen camera. Josine took a bottle of water out of the refrigerator and was about to leave when her gaze fell on the door to the basement. She froze, looking at the key in the lock. My heart jumped. Had she really guessed, or had she heard Lucy talking about me? Josine took a few steps toward the door, then looked over her shoulder as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Then, to my amazement, she turned the key and opened the door slightly. "Grandma?" she called in a whisper. "Are you in there?" I almost dropped my phone in surprise. How did she know? I quickly tucked the phone into the pocket of my dress and rose to my feet. "Yes, Josine," I answered, trying to keep my voice low. "I'm here." The door opened wider and my granddaughter's face appeared in the dim light of the basement. Her eyes widened with shock when she saw me. "Grandma," she exclaimed, coming down the stairs. "You're really here. I heard Mom tell Drake she locked you up, but I hope she was just kidding." "Alas, she wasn't," I said bitterly. Josine came closer, her face contorted with worry and shame. "It's terrible. I can't believe she did this." She lowered her head. "And I can't believe Dad let her." "Your father, he's in a difficult situation," I said, not wanting to completely vilify Jonathan in my daughter's eyes, though he certainly deserved it. "No, grandmother," Josine shook her head. "Don't make excuses for him. I heard them discussing sending you to a nursing home." I heard Daddy agree, even though he didn't look happy, but he agreed anyway. I sighed. My granddaughter was smarter than I thought. "You're right, dear, and that's not the only thing they did." I paused, deciding how much to tell a 15-year-old girl. "They also, taking money out of my accounts without my permission." Josine didn't look surprised. I guess something was wrong. For the past few months, Mom had been getting expensive new things, and when I asked where the money was coming from, she said it was a lucky investment. Suddenly, Lucy's voice came from upstairs. "Josine, where are you?" My granddaughter flinched and looked at me fearfully. "She mustn't know I'm here," she whispered. "She'll be furious." I nodded, understanding her fear. Josine knew better than I what Lucy was capable of when she was angry. "Go away," I said. "Pretend you just went to the kitchen to get water." Josine hesitated, clearly torn between her fear of her mother and her reluctance to leave me in the cellar. "But what about you? I can't just walk away and leave you here." "It's okay," I assured her. "I have a phone, and I've already called Talitha. She's contacted the police. They'll be here soon." "Aunt Talitha?" Josine's eyes widened even more. "But Mom and Dad said you haven't spoken to each other in years." It's a long story, I said. I'll tell it later. Right now, you'd better go before Lucy comes down to check. Josine! Lucy called again, her voice closer and more irritated. My granddaughter took a step toward the stairs, then turned back to me. I can't just leave you here, she said firmly. It's not right. The police will be here soon, I reminded her. I need you to be safe when they get here, please, Josine. Go. She was still hesitating, torn between her fear of her mother and her desire to help me. I could see the struggle on her young face, see her weighing her options, trying to make a decision that shouldn't have fallen on the shoulders of a 15-year-old girl. Josine, where are you? Lucy's voice came closer and closer, her irritation clearly audible. My granddaughter stood on the stairs, torn between fear of her mother and the desire to help me. Finally, she made a decision. I'll come back for you, Josine whispered. I promise. As soon as she went upstairs, she ran up the stairs, closing the door behind her but not locking it. I heard her meet Lucy in the kitchen. Where have you been? Lucy asked suspiciously. Just getting water, Josine replied. And in her voice, I heard for the first time echoes of the lies she must have learned from her mother. I was thirsty. What took you so long? Lucy wouldn't stop. I was looking for my bottle, the blue one, Josine answered quickly. I couldn't find it. There was a pause, then Lucy said, Go to bed. It's getting late. What about Grandma? Josine asked, and I held my breath, afraid she'd give herself away. What about Grandma? Lucy's voice turned icy. She's at a friend's house, isn't she? When will she be back? Clever girl, I thought, pretending to believe their lies. Tomorrow, Lucy answered briefly. Now go to bed. I heard footsteps retreating and breathed a sigh of relief. Josine was safe, for now. I went back to the phone and checked the cameras. The living room was almost empty, with only Drake sitting in an armchair with a glass of whiskey and Donathan half lounging on the couch. Lucy appeared from the kitchen, her face a look of annoyance. Everyone's finally gone, she said, sitting down on the couch next to Donathan. This party was exhausting. You threw it yourself, Donathan said, his voice a mixture of tiredness and condemnation. To maintain my social status, dear, Lucy replied, rolling her eyes. By the way, we have to remember to let the old woman out of the basement. Drake snorted. Why don't we leave her down there for the night? As a lesson. Lucy grinned. Tempting, but no. We don't want her to have any real reason to complain. She stretched. I'll go in half an hour. Let her sit a while longer, think about her behavior. I felt the blood rush to my face with anger. Think about her behavior! Like I was a naughty child, not a 67-year-old woman who'd been illegally locked in a basement on her own birthday. My phone vibrated, a message from Talitha. The police are on their way. I'm 10 minutes away. Hang in there, Mom. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Soon this would all be over. Soon justice would be served. Suddenly, the basement door opened again, and I saw Josine coming down the stairs in her pajamas and with her jacket in her hands. Grandma, she whispered, they're all in the living room drinking. Now would be a good time. I hesitated. Talitha's plan was for me to stay in the basement until the police arrived. But on the other hand, wouldn't it be better to face the charges in person? To see their faces when they realized their plans had been exposed? Talitha said the police would be here soon, I said. Maybe we should wait. What if they don't believe us? Josine objected. What if Mom and Dad convinced them that you just forgot that you went down to the basement by yourself? Or that you, she faltered, not yourself? There was truth in what she said. Lucy was a master manipulator. She could convince anyone of anything. Even if I had proof on my phone, the police could decide it was a family matter that didn't require their intervention. You're right, I said firmly. It was time to put an end to this. Josine helped me up the stairs, supporting me under her arm. My heart was pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. I didn't know how they would react, but I knew I wouldn't stay silent any longer. We walked out into the kitchen and stopped for a moment, listening to the voices from the living room. They were still discussing the party, Lucy bragging about how impressed her new outfit had made Donathan's boss's wife. Ready? Josine whispered. I nodded, squared my shoulders, and walked out of the kitchen into the living room with my head held high. Josine followed me, her face a mixture of fear and determination. For a second, there was complete silence in the room. Lucy froze with her glass halfway to her lips, her eyes wide with shock. Jonathan straightened abruptly on the couch, his face pale. Drake flinched faintly, but quickly regained his composure. Mom? Jonathan was the first to break the silence, his voice shaking. What are you? I thought you were in the basement. I was, I answered calmly. Your wife locked me in there more than 3 hours ago. On my birthday, Jonathan. Lucy came to her senses quickly. Burville, don't be absurd. Nobody locked you in. You must have locked yourself in and then forgotten about it. She turned to Josine, her eyes narrowed. What are you doing? I told you to go to bed. I couldn't leave my grandmother in the cellar, Josine replied, and there was a hardness in her voice that wasn't her own. What you did was awful, Mother. Josine! Lucy exclaimed, her face contorted with anger. Go to your room at once. No, said Josine, crossing her arms across her chest. I'm staying with grandmother. Lucy stood up, her eyes flashing with lightning. You don't know what you're talking about. Your grandmother is out of her mind. She's confusing reality with fiction. We're just… No more lies, Lucy, I interrupted, pulling my phone out of my pocket. The game is over. What do you mean? She asked, but there was a note of panic in her voice. I know everything, I said. About your plans to send me to Pine Hills. About you and Drake stealing money from my accounts. About how you've been intercepting Talitha's letters all these years. About everything. Lucy's face turned pale, but she pulled herself together quickly. It's nonsense. Jonathan, your mother is completely out of her mind. We should seriously consider professional help for her. Jonathan looked from me to his wife, obviously not knowing what to say. Lucy, maybe we should… Shut up, Jonathan, Lucy said sharply. You can see she's not herself. Oh, I'm more than sane, I said, turning on the camera app on my phone. And I have proof. I turned the screen toward them and they saw the kitchen camera footage of Lucy and Drake discussing the best way to get rid of me and take my money. What the hell was that? Lucy exclaimed, her voice rising an octave. Were you spying on us? Put cameras in our house? My house, I corrected. The house I bought with my money. And yes, I installed cameras after my stuff started going missing. Winthrop's pearl earrings, my mother's brooch, my journal. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Drake finally spoke up, his tone deceptively calm. Burville, you've got it all wrong. We did discuss the possibility of transferring you to a specialized facility, but purely out of concern for your health. And as far as finances are concerned, all transactions were completely legal and with your consent. My consent? I laughed bitterly. You mean those forged signatures? I flipped through my phone and showed them a screenshot of a document with an obviously forged signature. That's not my signature, Drake, and we both know it. For the first time, I saw his confidence shake. These documents were signed by Jonathan on your behalf, with your verbal consent. It's standard practice. Liar, I said calmly. I never gave such consent, and Jonathan knows it. I turned to my son, whose face was now whiter than chalk. Tell me, son, did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I would let you send me to Pine Hills, sell my house, and embezzle my money? Jonathan lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. Yeah, I thought it was best for everyone. You need supervision, and Lucy and I can't… Don't lie now, I interrupted him. You weren't thinking about looking after me. You were thinking about money. About the $320,000 you were planning to get when you sold the house. About the boat you wanted to buy with the money. Josine's eyes widened with shock. Dad, is it true? Jonathan didn't answer. His shoulders slumped under the weight of shame and exposure. Lucy, however, was not going to give up without a fight. It's all lies, she said, though her voice sounded less confident. You can't prove anything you say, and these so-called recordings can be faked. Who would believe a senile old woman against the word of 3 respectable adults? I will, came a voice from the front door. We all turned and saw Talitha standing in the doorway. Next to her was a uniformed police officer and a man in a strict suit, who I assumed was a lawyer, Adam Lawrence. Talitha? Jonathan was clearly shocked by his sister's appearance. What are you doing here? Saving our mother from the three of you, she answered coldly. Then she turned to me with a warm smile. Mom, are you okay? I nodded, feeling tears come to my eyes from relief at seeing my daughter. I am now. Lucy quickly changed tactics, a fake smile appearing on her face. Talitha, what a pleasant surprise. We didn't expect to see you after all these years. I'm sure you didn't, Talitha replied dryly, especially since you've been intercepting my letters and calls all these years. She turned to the policeman. Officer Ramirez, this is my mother, Burville Holloway, the one I told you about. She was illegally locked in the basement by these three men. In addition, there was financial fraud, which we have documentary evidence of. The officer nodded and stepped forward. Mrs. Holloway, do you want to press charges against these men? Yes, I answered firmly. I do. Lucy's face contorted with rage. This is ridiculous. You can't just barge into our house and I interrupted. It's not your house. The man in the suit, whom Talitha had introduced as Adam Lawrence, interrupted her. According to the deeds I've examined, this house was purchased with Mrs. Burville Holloway's money, although it's technically in her son's name. However, given the circumstances and the evidence of fraud we will present in court, ownership may be challenged. He pulled documents from his briefcase. This is a temporary restraining order prohibiting anyone other than Mrs. Burville Holloway from accessing her financial accounts. Also, here is an order to preserve all electronic and paper documents related to her finances. Any attempt to destroy or alter these documents will be considered obstruction of justice. Drake, who had remained relatively calm up to this point, suddenly turned even paler. You can't do that. This investment was made with the full consent of... Consent obtained by fraud, Mr. Campbellworth, Adam interrupted him, or using forged signatures. Either way, it's a serious violation of the law, and I'm sure the Securities and Exchange Commission will be very interested in looking into your activities. Drake's face took on a greenish tint. Officer Ramirez took another step forward. Mr. Campbellworth, I need to ask you some questions in connection with the allegations of financial fraud and abuse of an elderly man. You have the right to remain silent. While the officer read Drake his rights, I watched Lucy and Donathan. My sister-in-law looked as if her world was crumbling before her eyes, which in fact it was. Her carefully constructed plan to get rid of me and steal my money was falling apart. Donathan looked devastated. He sat with his head down, unable to look at me, at Talitha, or at his daughter, who looked at him with disappointment and pain in her eyes. How could you, Papa? Josine asked quietly. How could you do that to Grandma? Donatan raised his head, his eyes full of tears. I didn't know. I didn't realize it would go this far. Lucy said that Mom would be happier in an institution, that she needed professional care. Don't put this on me, Lucy interrupted him sharply. You knew exactly what was going on. You signed the documents. You took the money. You agreed to sell the house. Because you gave me no choice, Donathan exclaimed, raising his voice at his wife for the first time. You said that if we didn't do it, we'd lose the house, that we wouldn't be able to pay for Josine's college, That's enough, Lucy interrupted him. Don't you dare put the blame on me. You were more than happy to spend your mother's money on a new car and you were planning to buy a boat. They continued to bicker, spouting years of mutual resentment and manipulation, but I wasn't listening anymore. I looked at Talitha, who walked over to me and took my hand. Let's go, Mom, she said softly. You don't need to listen to this anymore. I'm taking you home. Home? I asked, suddenly realizing that I didn't know where my home was anymore. To me, Talitha clarified. To Rufus and me and little Winthrop. He's so looking forward to seeing you. At the mention of a grandson I'd never met, my heart sank. Does he really know about me? Of course, Talitha smiled. I told him about you every day. I've shown him pictures of you. He calls you Grandma Burvey and asks when you're coming. I felt tears roll down my cheeks, not from bitterness or resentment, but from hope. I still have a family, a real family that loves me. Josine came toward us, her face worried. What about me? She asked quietly. Can I visit my grandmother too? Talitha smiled at her niece and put her arm around her shoulders. Of course, sweetheart. You are always welcome in our home. and your cousin will be happy to meet you." Josine smiled weakly, but her eyes were still full of worry. "What will happen to Mommy and Daddy now?" Talitha sighed. "It depends on many factors. On the court's decision, on how much they will cooperate with the investigation. But one thing I can say for sure is that you won't be alone. We're going to help you through this." As we talked, Officer Ramirez led Drake away, who looked absolutely devastated. Lucy and Donathan continued to argue, blaming each other, their voices getting louder and angrier. "Let's get out of here," Talitha suggested, taking me under her arm. "Officer Ramirez said they would contact us tomorrow for an official statement. Right now you need your rest." I nodded, feeling suddenly tired. This day, which had started so bitterly, was ending with a glimmer of hope. I cast one last glance at Donathan, and our eyes met for a moment. In his gaze, I saw shame, remorse, and the realization that he had lost something much more precious than money, the trust and love of his mother. "Come on, Mom," Talitha repeated, pulling me gently toward the door. I let my daughter lead me out of a home that had never truly been mine, toward a new life with a family that truly loved me. 2 months later, I was sitting on the veranda of Talitha's house, watching little Winthrop play in the garden. He looked just like his grandfather, the same blue eyes, the same smile that made my heart squeeze every time. Next to me was Rufus, Talitha's husband, who was a kind, thoughtful man, not at all like the slacker Donathan had described. He was indeed a musician, but also a respected teacher at the art school, with a steady job and a talent I was beginning to appreciate. Talitha came out onto the veranda carrying a tray with cups of tea on it. "How are you feeling, Mom?" she asked, sitting down beside me. "Better," I answered honestly. "Better every day." And it was true. The first weeks after the move were difficult. Nightmares, anxiety attacks, the constant feeling of being in someone else's house. But Talitha, Rufus, and little Winthrop surrounded me with so much care and love that gradually I began to feel at home. The legal processes went on as usual. Drake was arrested for financial fraud, and the investigation revealed that I wasn't his only victim. Lucy was charged with accessory to fraud and elder abuse. Donathan faced less serious charges given his cooperation with the investigation and guilty plea. Attorney Adam Lawrence has been working to recover my money and has already succeeded in recovering a significant portion of it. As for the house in Pomona, the trial was still ongoing, but the prospects were good, given that I had made the principal payment and that Donathan had admitted it in his testimony. Josine was now living with us, at least temporarily. After Lucy's arrest and the divorce proceedings that Donathan had initiated, it had been decided that she would be better off at Talitha's. She was adjusting to a new life, a new school, new relatives. Sometimes at night I would hear her crying, and then I would sit with her, holding her hand, reminding her that she was not to blame for her parents' actions. Talitha worked to restore my financial independence. With her help, I opened new accounts that only I had access to. She also helped me make a new will and execute a power of attorney for her, a real power of attorney, with my real signature. "There's another letter from Donathan," Talitha said, interrupting my thoughts. "Do you want to read it?" I hesitated. Donathan had written to me every week since I'd left. Long, remorseful letters in which he explained how he had allowed himself to be manipulated by Lucy, how the fear of losing his home and his inability to secure Josine's future had clouded his judgment. He asked for forgiveness but didn't insist on it, realizing that some things couldn't be forgiven so easily. "Yes," I said at last. "I'll read it." Talitha handed me the envelope and tactfully stepped back to Winthrop, giving me space. I opened the letter and began to read my son's familiar handwriting. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive him. I don't know if we'll be able to rebuild even a shadow of the relationship we had before greed and manipulation poisoned his soul. But I knew one thing. I would no longer let fear and doubt run my life. I would no longer be a silent victim. At 67, I was beginning a new chapter of my life. With the daughter I had gotten back, with the grandson I was just beginning to recognize, with a granddaughter I was trying to protect from her parents' mistakes. It wasn't the fall of life I had envisioned, but perhaps it was exactly what I needed. And as I looked at Winthrop playing in the garden, at Talitha holding Rufus tenderly, at Josine smiling more and more, I realized that true wealth was not in bank accounts or houses. It is in these moments, in these connections, in this love that no one can steal.